Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time for leak list time again, one of my favourite times of the update cycle, and since we've had the first devlogs, it's time to have a look at what has been leaked. Obviously we're not going to go over the stuff that was in the devlogs, that would kind of be pointless, so it's time to have a look at everything else. So, let's get into it, let's have a look at what's there. The first vehicle I feel like has been leaked for the whole of the last year. It is the A6E SWIP, or the SWIP. This is a upgrade of the standard A6E, which gave it a Systems Weapons Improvement Program setup. So it basically meant it could carry a bunch of different ordnance options, including Mavericks, SLAMs, the good old Walleyes, and also the HARM anti-radiation missile. It also could carry the Harpoon, if that ever makes it into the game either. So this vehicle obviously will come at some point, but it's kind of getting tiring talking about it every update cycle. The next vehicle is the FV721. Now, this one is another reconnaissance vehicle from the British. It's a four-wheeled little armoured car, and basically, it's the Fox, and it's not really got a ton going on for it. It has the standard 30mm Radin cannon, has a bit of aluminium armour covering it, and also not a crazy powerful engine. It's only 190 horsepower, but even though it doesn't have a crazy engine, this vehicle can motor. It does have a 28.1 horsepower per ton power to weight, and also does have a machine gun on it too. This one is a pretty modern vehicle designed for very specific things, right? It's one of those which is just supposed to be a light reconnaissance vehicle to throw around the place, and did serve until the 90s in certain areas. So, in general, it would be cool to see this one, but really don't expect too much from it. Then, of course, we have the Northrop F20 Tiger Shark. We actually talked about this the other day. It's the further evolution of the F5E, which we already have in game. The F20 was one of those vehicles that unfortunately got annihilated by the time it came out. It wasn't really its fault. It was more the US had decided that they wanted to carry on with the F-16s, and the F20 just kind of sat in a bit of a weird middle ground. Even exporting-wise, got done in by the F-16 too. It was from the 1980s. It is slightly different from the F5. The major differences between it are the actual ordnance options it could have. Instead of just having access to stuff like AIM-9s, it also had access to bombs, AIM-7s as well, and technically also things like AMRAAMs as well, if you ever wanted to do that stuff. Mavericks as well. So it's very much a light fighter, but also a multi-role machine, which you can add a ton of different stuff to. The other thing is the engine as well. Instead of having two smaller engines, it had the General Electric F404 GE100 afterburning turbofan engine, which has a lot of power behind it as well, which was cool to see. It's a really interesting aircraft, and I really hope it gets into the game at some point, but right now, it obviously isn't there. For Germany, you have the Bf109C1. Now, this is another variant of the Bf109. We have the A, the B, the E, the F, the G, and now the C. Now, the C, guess what? It came after the B. Crazy, right? But the C, basically, the big difference between it and the B was it had a different engine. Instead of using the UMO 210D, it used the UMO 210G. This gave it a little bit more horsepower, 690 horsepower overall. They also strengthened the wings so it could carry more machine guns. So the C series actually had 4 machine guns in total, 4 7.92s, very similar to the E1 that we have in the game right now. The C1 specifically was the first production version of the C series. There was technically some which could have better armament. Technically, if they add the C3, that could have the 20mm MGFFs, but it still has the two-bladed propeller and also the general overall look of the B. Just a slightly upgraded engine and slightly upgraded firepower. You also have a helicopter, the AH-1W. This is a Chinese helicopter, or Taiwanese helicopter specifically. The vehicle itself was actually used and still used by the Republic of China, or Taiwan, and the difference between it and the standard AH-1 is it's basically a day-night version. It has slightly better engines than the standard one, and also, of course, advanced weapon capabilities. Isn't as good as stuff like the H-1Z, which we also see in the game, but kind of a similar idea, at least from it. They could also add some other nations to this if they wanted. Good old Turkey could get it, and also Iran technically around the place too. The Canadians also make a look with the Leopard 2A4M. So this is a, well, I suppose a modernized version of the standard Leopard 2A4 that the Canadians use. The Canadians use, of course, Leopard 2s, and the 2A4 specifically was used during Afghanistan, and they decided that they wanted to buy some, but also upgrade them at the same time. One of the ideas was actually to add a L55 cannon to the 2A4, but they decided against it, just because they wanted the shorter barrel, but there are some other additions. So they decided to add some extra armor to it, some anti-mine protection, of course, and then also some slat armor was added too, and some applique armor, which is similar to the 2A7's one. It also had an all-electric digital turret, digital central logic main distribution system, new commander system control units, some better brakes, an upgraded suspension, and also some driver viewing aids as well. So not a ton of stuff that would matter too much in War Thunder, but the vehicle itself is looking really cool, and also does have the good old triangles on the front of it. So even though it's a vehicle that looks like a 2A6, it is in fact a 2A4. We also have the ZBD-04, and the only way I can really describe this is it's a Chinese BMP-3. Imagine that you took a BMP-3 and basically gave it to China and asked them to make it look slightly Chinese. That's pretty much it. The vehicle has access to a 100mm rifle gun, it fires AT gems out of that gun, and also, hey presto, it has a 30mm coaxial gun as well, which shouldn't be too surprising. The vehicle also has a diesel engine with 590 horsepower. It can technically add some more anti-tank missiles to it, but the main AT gem that it uses is the 3UBK-10, which is a kind of copy of the Bastion, which you'll find from other vehicles. It is also laser beam riding, which should be quite fun, and can penetrate a decent amount of 600mm of armor. This vehicle is pretty modern though. It's been in service since the late 90s and is still in service today for the Chinese, and it is just a standard IFV. I don't know how else to put it really. It should be pretty fun once it gets added to the game, especially with the fact that it should have some great thermals. Then we have Alpha for GB in France, which I'm guessing is talking about the Alpha jet, which was co-manufactured by Dassault and also Dornier. So this is kind of an interesting one. This is a German and French creation, but in the game, it's looking like it's probably going to be added to Britain and France. The Alpha jet was one of those which is a light attack jet. It also is one which was used for a lot of training and also used for a bunch of different things for many different countries. It was also used a lot for stuff like flight demonstrations and also just general display team stuff as well, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't carry a decent amount of ordnance. And in British service, it actually had a different name, just like it did for a bunch of others, but also Canada was another country that got given a bunch of different jets as well. So this vehicle, it has some turbofan engines from Snecma, the Turbomeca Lazarks, the 04C5s. It also cannot go Mach 1, so it's at 1,000 kilometers an hour for its maximum speed, but since it's one of these kind of light attack aircraft like the AMX, it also can go incredibly low speeds as well. It has access to a 27mm Mauser, but but it can also carry a 30mm Defer, so really depends on what you feel like, and it also has a bunch of hardpoints on it, which can carry a ton of different stuff, whether it's magics, whether it's mavericks, sidewinders, cluster bombs, you know, general snebs, or just general rocket pods. It's one of those that can just do it all, you know. It's another one of these light attack aircraft, just like a bunch we have in game, designed to carry pretty much everything. The next one is the ZSU-23-4M4. Now, this one's a bit odd, because, hey, guess what? There's a ton of Shilka variants that are named M something. So, it could be a bunch of different ones, whether it's the Polish one, which had the Grom surface-to-air missiles added to it, or whether it was some of the upgraded ones from the good old Soviet Union, like the Biryusha. But my guess is it's actually talking about the 4M4, which was a modernized variant of the standard Shilka. Basically, what they added to it was 2 additional paired Iglas, so it would have access to 4 Igla man-portable, you know, the surface-to-air basic missiles, which are used to defend against aircraft. It also got smoke grenades, laser emission sensors, electric-optical vision devices as well, just to kind of help it out. And also, the big thing is an improved radar system, which would be super nice for the vehicle in general. So, a massive modernization for it, and also didn't really go anywhere, but it is another one of those which eventually will make it into the game. You also have the T-80UD. Now, the T-80UD is an interesting one. Take the T-80U, remove the engine, you know, that big old gas turbine, which has a lot of horsepower behind it, and then just put in a standard diesel engine, you know, 6TD diesel with 1,000 horsepower, makes it a lot more economical, a lot more also easier to maintain, which was like a big one from it, because the issue with the T-80U, even though it had a lot of advantages with its engine, there were some big issues, such as high fuel consumption, since of course it's a gas turbine, and then also at the same time so much maintenance was needed and production. Whereas this, the T-80UD, they just decided to plonk 1,000 horsepower diesel engine in it, and it worked pretty well. There was a ton of these built, by the way. Like there was about maybe 700 or 800 of these which were built, and they were in Ukraine, basically through the 80s and the 90s until the Soviet Union fell. And then Ukraine actually started selling them all over the world. So there's a bunch of different nations which have these T-80UDs. So technically they are USSR vehicles, but nowadays they are Ukrainian mostly. And also Ukraine is even getting some of them back from different countries moving around. All of the other stuff is exactly the same from the standard T-80U. You know, you have the 125mm stabilized gun, you got the 12.7 on the top, you have, you know, the APF SDS, you have everything else. The major difference is just the engine. I'd like to thank Schnitzel Stroker, Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, B. Young, Opium Prime, Masonocrat, Lafouche, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.